Permanent residency in Canada is a status granting someone who is not a Canadian citizen the right to live and work in Canada without any time limit on their stay. To become a permanent resident, a foreign national must apply to Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, formerly known as Citizenship and Immigration Canada, under one of several programs. In addition to the conferred right of abode in Canada, a primary benefit of permanent residency is the eligibility to apply for Canadian citizenship after a certain period of permanent residency. A permanent resident holds many of the same rights and responsibilities as a Canadian citizen, including the right to live, work, and study in any province or territory of Canada. Permanent residents participate in many of the same social benefits that Canadian citizens receive, including becoming contributing members of the Canada Pension Plan and receiving coverage by their province or territory's universal health care system. All permanent residents may avail themselves of the rights, freedoms, and protections of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, other than those exclusively granted to citizens. Permanent residents may apply for Canadian citizenship after living in Canada for a certain amount of time. Currently, a person must have been living in Canada as a permanent resident for 3 years out of the 5 years preceding their application. They also have the right to sponsor relatives for permanent residence, subject to fulfilling residence criteria and assurance of support requirements. Permanent residents do not have the right to vote in elections in Canada, nor can they run for elected office in any level of government. Several municipal governments in Canada, including Toronto, Vancouver, Halifax, and Calgary, have proposed giving permanent residents the right to vote in municipal elections, but that would require approval from their respective provincial governments. For national security reasons, permanent residents also cannot hold jobs in either the public or private sectors that require a high-level security clearance. As non-citizens, permanent residents must use the passport of their current nationality in combination with a permanent resident card for international travel because they cannot be issued Canadian passports. Some countries will grant visa-free entry to Canadian permanent residents even if their current nationality would not typically qualify. To re-enter Canada on a commercial carrier, a permanent resident must present either their permanent resident card or a permanent resident travel document issued by a Canadian diplomatic office. A permanent resident must live in Canada for 2 years out of every 5, or risk losing that status. Time spent traveling with a Canadian spouse, on a business trip for a Canadian business, or working for a federal or provincial government office abroad can be included in the calculation. Permanent residents also risk loss for serious crimes, being a security risk or associated with organized crime. Failing to meet the residency or admissibility requirements above results in loss of permanent residence status when the finding becomes final without appeal. If the finding is made outside Canada, and upon the person being issued a departure order from Canada. If the finding is made inside Canada, a person automatically loses permanent residence status upon becoming a Canadian citizen. A permanent resident may also voluntarily renounce their status if the person possesses a citizenship or right of abode in another country. A person who gives up their status inside Canada must depart the country or apply for a temporary resident visa. A permanent resident does not lose their status if their permanent resident card expires. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada began issuing the permanent resident card, commonly known as a PR card, to all new Canadian permanent residents in 2002 as part of security improvements following the September 11 attacks. All existing permanent residents were given the option of applying for a permanent resident card at a cost of $50. Though possessing a card is not mandatory except in the case of international travel. From December 31, 2003, every permanent resident must be able to present his or her permanent resident card upon boarding a commercial carrier in order to travel to Canada, as the permanent resident card may be issued only in Canada. Those permanent residents who are outside Canada and without a permanent resident card may apply for a single-use permanent resident travel document from the nearest Canadian diplomatic office. The permanent resident card expires every 5 years, and then may be renewed by making application and proving that the applicant has been physically present in Canada for the requisite time period, or has otherwise satisfied the residency requirements. Although an individual may meet the residency requirements by living outside